You asked for it. Here it is. It's a podcast from Apathetic Enthusiasm.
Coming to you live from the Indigo Ballroom at the Hilton Bayfront Hotel in a dimension where anime cosplayers have organized into a renegade fighting force. And we've been forced to shelter in this ballroom for the last week. We're running out of food, and this is Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast.
We have not succumbed to cannibalization yet. But things are getting dire in the Indigo Ballroom.
Travis is starting to look like a hot dog, and
that's just when I put my shoulders up.
Yeah, that's exactly what you look like. It's odd. Hey, everybody, welcome to Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast. I am Brandon.
Yeah, I'm Travis. Welcome to the show. So glad that you're joining us on the show where we occasionally talk about Rick and Morty. We're so happy that you're here. So happy that you're joining us. And we will, of course, be talking about the Rick and Morty panel from San Diego Comic-Con. But before we get into all of that, plenty of things that we have to get out of the way first. And no plug is more important to everything right now than a plug for our Instagram. That's right, at Rick and Morty Pod, P-O-D, the new, improved, and flourishing Instagram account for this podcast. That's right, at Rick and Morty Pod. If you're a listener of this podcast and you feel like you used to follow us on Instagram, I highly encourage you to go back and make sure that you're following our new account, new, improved, and following all community standards and guidelines.
That is correct. We already talked about this on our last podcast, but yeah, make sure you go.
If you missed the last one, make sure you go back. And a special plug right now, this week only, we're doing our first giveaway on the Instagram. So if you're not following, go follow over there. We're giving away some swag from San Diego Comic-Con, so go check it out over on our Instagram.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You can always email us also at rickandmortypodcast@gmail.com. You can go to Reddit, rickandmorty.reddit.com. There, some people post some stuff there, surprisingly.
Yeah, it happens. I get notifications about it almost every day.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, you can go to our website, rickandmortypod.com. We are not streaming, so go ahead and ignore that. I don't know if you're recording this video, but if you are
of course I'm recording video.
You'll see that on youtube.com/apathetic enthusiasm. You can also support our shows over at Patreon, patreon.com/apathetic enthusiasm, where we haven't put any much content in there lately, but we've been very, very, very busy.
So very busy
doing things.
We're gonna record special post-show content tonight to put out on Patreon, just for us. We're just gonna chit chat for a little bit to give it a little something for the patrons over at patreon.com. Appreciate their support, and we have tons to talk about. This is a jam-packed show, so I think we should delay no further and get right into semi-pertinent news.
Well, you got semi-pertinent news in your radio. You got semi-pertinent news on podcast station. You got semi-pertinent because it's not quite pertinent. It's semi-pertinent. That's what we do when we don't have the content. All right.
At least we have like pertinent news for the main thing, and the whole show isn't semi-pertinent, which has been the case as of late. But yeah, we do have as we mentioned, we went to San Diego Comic-Con. If you're a subscriber to this podcast, to our YouTube channel, you have definitely seen some of that content. Whether it's Apathetic Enthusiasm breakdowns, we had our bonus episode with the interview with Teenage Euthanasia. We also did a intimate, cricket-filled backyard podcast about our time at San Diego Comic-Con. But this is much more to the point. This is much more information from Comic-Con that we have been stewing on. We have been thinking about for almost a week now. And these are the things, the big news items that came out of San Diego Comic-Con that are in some way related to Rick and Morty. And for semi-pertinent news, we have 3 panels that are not the Rick and Morty panel that I think stand out specifically for us to talk about. The first one being Crapopolis.
Crapopolis, that's right. This is the first show that it was very first night, second night. Oh no, it was the second night because we took the train that night, the trolley, and I got motion sick. That was fun. So we saw the panel for Crapopolis, and it was hosted by the supervising director. He came out, introduced it because there was no actors. There were no actors or writers there. Dan Harmon. Yeah. Steve Levy walked in, one of the executive producers, but he went into the very, very back. But we got a chance to watch 2 episodes of Crapopolis, and we also got a little swag bag with a nice
bag,
nice little shirt. This is the show that it's like a Greek animation show. It's got funny stuff in it. Tyrannus. It comes out on
funny stuff. I mean, there's definitely some Dan Harmon energy.
Matt Berry's in it.
Matt Berry. I gotta say, I think the voice acting cast for this show is really great. After seeing the 2 episodes, I thought they did a good job, and some really talented folks that they brought together for this. It's interesting. I think there is a definite and noticeable tonal difference in shows that are produced for, say, Fox Animation versus something that's produced for Adult Swim. When we talk about Teenage Euthanasia, talk about Rick and Morty, a little bit more edgy, a little bit more I won't use the word sophisticated, but a little bit more crass in the humor at times, or willing to, go a little bit more insane with some of the concepts.
The polish is different. That's what it is, right? It's a difference between, just like wiping down a countertop and using Pledge on the countertop, right? Like the Fox animated shows are using Pledge. They're using like the advanced formula Pledge, which leaves a little bit of sheen, right? A little bit of lemon scent to it.
That's what it is. It's the lemon scent. That's what I was picking up on.
Yeah. So we watched that. That was the first one that we watched. Now on the Rick and Morty panel day, we were in there for a while, and we're going to get into the Rick and Morty panel here in a second. But we have a couple things to go through first. One of them was we stuck around for the Solar Opposites panel, which that one was interesting because nobody came out on stage. There was no introduction, nothing. It was basically just, hey, here's 2 episodes of Solar Opposites, the new season.
They had like a pre-recorded like intro type thing for it, which I wonder like how quickly they put that together. Yeah. Because they threw that out, and that was it. Like, panel time started, roll video.
Yeah, video of animation. It was the characters from Solar Opposite. They animated it specifically, I guess, for the intro to be like, sorry, we don't have any actors here. Right?
Yeah.
But I haven't watched Solar Opposites really since the first season. I watched a little bit of season 2. The 2 episodes that they viewed were from season 4, which I didn't realize they were that far into it.
Yeah.
And we heard the new voice of Corvo, Island being gone, the new voice actor coming in and doing that. And I think it maybe at first is noticeable, but then it goes right into it, and you just kind of accept that voice being the voice now. So
yeah, I'd agree. I think the show, watching those 2 episodes, they're entertaining. I thought they were funny. I think it's still a good show. I also have not caught up to the show since season 2, but I think if you're a fan of Solar Opposites, I think you'll probably be excited for the 4th season coming out on Hulu. In a Mayhem.
And a Mayhem.
Not a sponsor.
Nope.
But but before we get into the actual Rick and Morty panel, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about what I think we both agree was one of our favorite panels that we attended for all of San Diego Comic-Con, and that was Nathan Pyle, his creativity panel that was really also acting as a promotion for his new show, Strange Planet. If you are not familiar with Nathan Pyle, he is a comic artist. He draws those cute little blue aliens that probably have shown up on your Instagram or other social media feeds. They're very literal. And back in 2020, he had a meeting with Dan Harmon to develop this premise of these aliens into an actual animated series. Fast forward 3 years, and the series is here. It is coming out like in a week on Apple TV Plus. And his panel had it was Nathan Pyle and Steve Levy talking about creativity, but also talking about the development of Strange Planet.
Yeah, Travis isn't wrong. It was my favorite panel of the entire event. Nathan Pyle and Steve Levy talking about the show. Yeah, I mean, even before talking about the show, Nathan talking about like his presentation about creativity and like the different ways he's creative using TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and him also saying like, people ask me how I become an expert on things. Like, I'm not an expert. My kids will be an expert someday, but I just watch what other people are doing, and like watch what they do and then adopt some of that stuff. And he talked about layering, he talked about movement, capturing stuff. So that was really, 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 really cool. The talking about Strange Planet, him and Steve talking about that was so cool. Like, they seem such like the development of these characters, the development of the show, talking about communication. What the most interesting thing to me was they were talking about sitcoms, classic 80s, 90s sitcoms, where the whole conflict of the show is the characters are deceptive about something, and then the resolution is at the very end. Like, oh, okay, we're honest with each other now.
Yeah.
Now that resolves the conflict. Whereas in this world, with these beings, the conflict comes from their honesty with each other, and how honesty creates conflict, and how we can work through that, and how we can become better people, if in a utopia. Anyways, it was really, really cool, and so I appreciate them for that.
Yeah, I am really interested to check out that show when it premieres. Since during the panel, we were only able to see a clip from the opening credits, but since this panel, they have actually released the full trailer for the series, and I'm more excited about it. I think the show concept is really interesting. I've loved his artwork and his comedy, and combining that with Dan Harmon. I'm really interested to see how this goes. So I don't know. Yay, Nathan Pyle! Congratulations. And he was super nice to us. We went to his booth, and like, he signed stuff for us, and we bought his book, and he signed it, and he like asked us about the podcast and all this stuff. Just real nice guy.
Stand up. Is it a stand up fella? A stand up fella doing stand up things. Anyways, celebrating him.
Not stand up comedy, but
yeah. No. Just a stand up fella. But he is funny as well. But let's move on. We have a lot to discuss with the panel stuff. But first, before we get into that piece, real quick, let's get into the Dan Harmon social media minute.
Dan Harmon. All right. So Dan Harmon, he's staying active. He's staying on the socials. And this week, while all the writers are out of work because they're striking, we have a wonderful video from Dan where he's bowling, and it's the caption is "Writer's Spare." So here's Dan Harmon bowling. He's wearing a bowling shirt. He's got a split, and he picks up the split. He's embraced by somebody that he's bowling with, and then does an amazing arm flailing dance. It's really great. If you haven't seen it, go follow at Dan Harmon on Instagram And while you're there, don't forget to check out at Rick and Morty Pod. Sign up for our giveaway.
That's great.
But that's it. That's your Dan Harmon social media, man.
Woo! We did it. We did it, Travis. I'm excited. Let's. I don't know what else we have to talk about today, but I guess
I think
we
that's
can.
pretty much it. We don't talk about Rick and Morty on this show. So, oh, wait. We have, scrolling through my notes here, we have one more segment, something we like to call the main thing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of Rick and Morty at SDCC. It's the main thing, talking about panel time. Ha! Ha! Ha!
That's right. 10 years of Rick and Morty.
I haven't had time to produce any music, Travis. You understand.
This is fine.
You
I
understand.
totally, I haven't been able to produce voice, apparently.
Produce voice. Okay, well, let me take this so you can clear your throat. We're talking about 10 years of Rick and Morty panel at San Diego Comic-Con. That's right. They had it. They had a panel. They had an hour-long panel. We got there for Teenage Euthanasia. We sat there. We listened to Alyssa and Allison, and that was great. And then there was supposed to be a Metalocalypse panel in between that.
Yep.
Well, there wasn't one. There wasn't one at all. And so we waited there for like another hour sitting there, hanging out. And eventually, woo, la, 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 it happened. Some folks came out. We had Steve Levy come out, the producer, executive producer, Susanna Belk, producer who oversees all post-production, Jacob Hare, a supervising director, and Elisa Phillips, who started back in 2014 as a color designer and is now a lead character designer. So those were the 4 folks coming out. Cheryl Eddy from Gizmodo went ahead and hosted that panel.
Yep.
And that's where we started. There was lots of questions. There was lots of things that we wanted to cover. And so let's go ahead and cover that, Travis. Take it away.
Let's get into it. All right. So it was a big room. Lots of people, fans really still showing up for Rick and Morty. I got the feeling that there were a lot of people sitting through some of those previous panels just to guarantee their seat for Rick and Morty. A lot of Rick and Morty shirts and things in the audience hours ahead of the Rick and Morty panel. But yeah, the panel itself opened up with a video montage that, and again, they were trying to highlight this idea of 10 years of Rick and Morty and the fact that the show has been around for a decade now. So that opening montage, a lot of clips about from the show, highlights and famous scenes from the past, 6 seasons. And then that kind of shifted into clips of Rick and Morty sort of in the real world. So whether you had Wormageddon stuff, Rick and Morty fans in different places or different events, there might have been some Rickmobile content in there. Yeah. But yeah, and just this overall idea about the phenomenon that is Rick and Morty. So that was fun to see, and that kind of set the tone for the line of questions that was presented to the panel. The first being sort of asking about what has been the secret to the show's success.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there was a variety of answers when it came to what the recipe is. And I think like the big aspect of it, and something that we've gleaned from folks that we've talked to, is just how complicated and how much work goes into the show. One person mentioned like that it's like basically like 5 shows in one. Yeah. The amount of background work, the amount of turnarounds they showed. You may have this later in the notes, but like they showed some art from like turnarounds from different characters from like Night Family, and like how much work goes into that. What else did we have in there?
One of the things that Steve Levy spoke to initially was the idea of the multiverse and the fact that pretty early on in Rick and Morty, you get this premise of a multiverse, which now, after Marvel movies and so many other things happening, multiverses are kind of everywhere, and we're almost a little bit burnt out by multiverses. But Rick and Morty very initially presented this idea of multiple dimensions, multiple realities, in a way that was relatively easy to digest and understand for the viewers. And I think that's something that they were able to take something very complex and then sort of make it palatable to an audience.
And they
so
they
that was
did
a great
shout out Jeff Loveness, who wrote Ant-Man Quantumania.
Yeah, they did.
They-
They did mention that.
They did that.
But and then he also goes on to say, this is Steve Levy saying that at the end of the day, it is a story about people who have the same trauma that all of us do, right? So even though it's high concept sci-fi rigmarole, at the end of the day, this is a story about a family that has to work together and deal with some of the same issues that they always do.
Yeah, and that was something that when we talked to Alyssa and Allison about teenage euthanasia, like they had a similar thought, right? Which is like it's just a story about people that have the same trauma that all of us do, and I think that's interesting. Just as an aside from a writing perspective. And I know you have this in the show notes from at the end of the panel with the Loveness bit about Mr. Poopy Butthole at the end of the season, right?
Yeah.
Like write about what you know. And I think that's really interesting. Like even with a show about Rick and Morty, it's like the writers are extracting from themselves to put into a show that's essentially, sci-fi rigmarole and all that good stuff, but it's still about humans at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. I thought that insight was really interesting. The other thing that I found interesting in this portion of the panel was how much they talked about sort of creative freedom and the ability for lots of writers and artists to just go nuts and come up with really over-the-top ideas. And then I really appreciated, who was it? I think it was
Jacob?
Eliza Phillips, who was a character designer, talking about how when they go nuts, that really creates like an extra level of difficulty for some of these character designers and folks who have to then make all these characters or make these scenes come to life in the animation process. So
like all the Cronenbergs, how difficult that is to do anything with like lots of tentacles and and that type of thing. And then Jacob Hare like mentioning about the episode where Morty has the reset button, and there's that whole little interlude with like the Alive Pixar type movie thing where they said just go crazy, and he got to put that whole thing in there because they were short on time. He storyboard, put all that together, and that stayed in the episode.
Yeah. Which was Vat of Acid, amazing episode, Emmy Award winning episode, which takes us right into the next topic that was in the panel, where they talked about Emmy Awards and talked about the fact that the show is nominated for another Emmy. This time with Night Family, and they really took some time to kind of break down Night Family as an episode and go a little bit more in depth into the creative process of an idea from Rob Schraub and how that idea goes from concept to animated episode.
Yeah, they talked about the I don't want to say minor, but the blacksmith, the alien blacksmith that creates all the plates for Rick to begin the episode. That was like Schraub. Essentially, they wanted to work with Schraub's design, but then eventually they're just like kind of stuck with Schraub's design. Same thing with Summer's Stay Awake suit. That was Schraub's design. Kind of stuck with it.
Covered
design.
in Brillo pads and Dewquill.
Forks on the back and all that type of stuff.
That was something that I found particularly interesting, was the fact that Schraub created what they called a lookbook, which was a lot of his own sketches and own concepts of this is what some of these things should look like in the show. When Schraub is credited as a writer, he's credited as he may be a producer for some of these episodes too, but he's typically not given like art credits in the show. But to see how much of the premise of Night Family really, like even visually, came from the mind of Schraub was interesting.
And I Elisa mentioned like Scud the Disposable Assassin.
Yeah.
And I always forget that. Well, Rob Schraub started with Scud. Like that is his thing. The Meeseeks are kind of based off of
his
Scud.
his origins are in comics, right? Like
Right.
it's not.
He is an artist first and foremost, and you can see that in like some of the shirts and merchandise that he sells on TeePublic or wherever it is. Yeah, so that was really cool. One thing that I leapt to that I was so excited to hear about was Jacob Hare, the director for that episode.
Yeah.
So excited to do animated horror. He talked about Creepshow 2, specifically, not Creepshow 1, which is fantastic, but also Creepshow 2, which I have a special space in my heart for, but it's not as great as the first one. But like talking about pulling from Creepshow 2 and loving horror, and like pulling from that, and he was talking about like 2D animation, 2D horror, how to make that effective. And he was talking about like doing lots of close-ups, like lots of close-ups will make it more horrific, right?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed listening to that, and then I was like, I want to talk to him about horror stuff only. I don't even care about Rick and Morty shit. I just want to talk to him about.
Nope. So
Easy.
so check him out on a weird spin-off podcast where Brandon just talks about horror. That's the name of the podcast.
Don't put that on me. Okay.
Through this, they talked a lot, and this kind of reflects back to what we were talking about before, how sometimes the show goes through a lot of changes, even through the process of animation, where it's not the show can look pretty close to done in certain scenes, and then either standards and practices will say, oh, you can't do that, you have to change something. One particular example is they showed the scene where they were scraping the plate into Rick's mouth, and that was apparently supposed to be a plate of diarrhea. and they're like, nope, can't do that. So they showed the change where there was like food on the plate,
Noodles. Like
yeah,
that.
so then it's nasty food, and that makes it okay.
And they also talked about like cutting something earlier in the episode where like he actually shat on the plates.
Yes.
And so like
Yeah.
there was some context missing from that, but it was behind the scenes is he was actually eating his own shit off the plates.
Yeah.
That was the point of that.
That's a special detail you only hear. Like I don't know that I've seen any of the other news outlets talking about sound-alikes. They're not covering the fecal matter on the plates.
The
right?
important
you
part
gotta come to this podcast to that or showed up at the panel. That's the type of hard-hitting news
Yes.
we make sure to cover for sure.
There was another aspect that they changed as well. They showed a scene of Summer coming into the room, and she had baggy eyes. She had very, very baggy eyes as a night Summer. And they talked about how they wanted to make it to where, they want a little bit of realism when they're going into the show, even when it's fantastical. And they're like, well, it doesn't make sense physiologically if Night Summer or any of the night people switch and their eyes become unbaggy. So instead of making them their eyes baggy, that's when they went with like the glow in their eyes. And so they showed the change, the difference in that. And yeah, I mean, obviously when you watch the episode, towards the end, especially when they're like hitting each other and falling asleep and all that type of stuff, it wouldn't make sense for their eyes to go baggy, not baggy, baggy, not baggy, baggy, not baggy. So the glow
and I think it makes that one scene where Summer does the quick switch and you realize, oh, it's night Summer and not day Summer. I think it makes it more powerful, I think, in that moment as well. But
Indeed,
anyway.
indeedly do.
All right.
And then, okay, so also Elisa mentions that standards and practices hates nipples.
Not a fan. Yeah, she was referencing when she was working on the concept designs for
Fortune Cookie episode.
Chunt from the Fortune Cookie episode, and then they go on to talk about the Fortune Cookie monster, and the
SMP doesn't like monster nipples.
But it's there in my notes. And I want to reiterate, just to set the scene for this, Brandon and I were sitting in the very front row of this panel, as we should, as representatives for you, Unity, at this panel. I'm third seat in from the aisle. First seat obviously belongs to the Golden Rickhead. And then there's Brandon, and then there's me. And sitting beside me is Jacob Hare's guest at the event, who we had been chatting with prior to. And as soon as the panel opens, whew, I pull out my laptop. I open my laptop, and I'm clacking away on my laptop throughout the whole thing. So yes, there are notes that say S&P hates nipples in my notes. But I was super self-conscious, like, through that whole time, because I'm like, okay, I got my notes app open. Her very good friend is up on stage, and I'm just recording whatever he says with my fingers, and she can see my screen, so I guess I better be nice, whatever I say.
See it. She can see it all. There's a hole in the wall with them, man. You can see it all. And speaking of seeing it all, the next bit that she might have seen in your notes is the season 7 discussion, which is where we're going in the future, right?
Yeah.
It's 10 years of Rick and Morty, but we have however many more years after this to go. And so the season 7 discussion, led by Steve Levy, obviously the big question on everybody's mind is Solar Opposites just replaced the voice entirely with a different accent and everything. Who's going to replace Rick and Morty? And when we were first at the panel, but before right after Teenage Euthanasia, we didn't feel like we had tickets for press, so we actually went back and we found seats towards the back of the room a little bit, and we were sitting in front of a row that were not as into Rick and Morty as you, Unity. They weren't as in the know as you.
They don't have their finger on the pulse of the multiverse. All right,
And
they're not spending their time listening to other people talk about Rick and Morty. Because if they were, they would not be as shocked and baffled by the news that they were discussing behind us.
They were like, so they're going to replace the voice of Rick? Like, oh, wow, yeah, that's crazy, But they're going to keep Morty the same? Like, they were saying, I'm like, you guys, I guess they don't know that Rick and Morty is voiced by the same person.
It was such a weird journey that they took us on, because in the same conversation, members of their group not only learned that Justin Roiland had gotten into trouble, that he had been cleared, but that he had other problematic things that caused him to be let go from the show.
But also that explains why their voices sounded different in season 4 and 5.
Yeah.
They did
that was a particular note that I found interesting, that apparently their voices already sounded different, even though Justin has so far voiced the characters in every episode.
Anyway, so those folks aside, hey, if you're listening to, we love you.
Yeah,
you didn't know that we were funny. So Steve Levy talked about the recast of Rick and Morty, saying it's going to be great. The show is as good as it has ever been, and the writing is the best that it's ever been. There's a much larger story to tell with these characters, more one-offs, but also a lot of Rick-focused canon. When, Travis?
Pretty dang soon, and that's a quote.
That's a quote. Multiple times, as a matter of fact. Soon.
Real close. We're working on it all the time.
Pretty dang soon. Which seems to tell me, and maybe we can confirm this through our sources, that I don't think it's pretty dang soon.
I think maybe they don't know exactly how soon it is.
They're uncertain about when it's coming out, and that's
sure
about that? But so they talked about the Rick recast. We'll go back to that for a second. It's something we reported already from the premiere, the French outlet.
Yeah,
it's what they've been saying over and over again, and it's what we've been reporting, which is it's like Mel Blanc as Bugs Bunny. He started off as Bugs Bunny. He had to retire eventually. It's gone through a bunch of different voices. Right now it's Eric Bauza, and like that, you still know it as Bugs Bunny, even though it sounds different.
Yeah.
Same thing we talked about Kermit, right? The voice is different. It is still the same character, but it's going to sound similar. And so Steve kind of points that out.
Yeah, and really they didn't offer up that information in the core portion of the panel. That had to come from a question from the audience when they got into the Q&A portion. So I feel like they were just trying to kind of like avoid the topic, but they knew that it would get brought up, so they were ready for the conversation when it happened.
Yeah.
Moving on to additional insights from season 7, we were given the opportunity to view an animatic from season 7. So it was a cold open, if you will, for an episode that did not contain Rick or Morty in the episode, which I thought, okay, makes sense, especially if they're not willing to come out on a stage as big as San Diego Comic-Con and announce who the new voice actors are. Either they don't have them solidified or they're still working on them. Oh, by the way, there's this whole actor strike that's going on. That complicates things as well. Maybe they don't have an animatic or a clip with the new voices that they're ready to show in this setting. So they picked a cold open from an episode revisiting some characters from the past.
Some classic characters from the past. They introduced this clip by saying Rob Schrab wrote this scene, bringing back some classic characters that you didn't expect and brought them back in a way that makes sense. And so this sneak peek of season 7 was a cold open with bringing back Water T. And from last we saw from the rise of the Numericons.
I wrote it like 5 different ways. Pneumonitrons. I think I wrote Numberonicons in my notes. I was typing very fast. But yeah, it is an action sequence where Water T is back on his home planet. He's fighting against, all these different characters, and eventually has to go and get help with a number system, and he happens to know a very
important mathematician.
Very important mathematician. That's
on Earth. Is it a spoiler if we saw it? Look, if you don't want to know who it is, stop listening for like 10 seconds. Starting now. The very special mathematician that Water T looks for is Mr. Goldenfold.
Oh, that's right. That's right. and spoiler over. I thought that was awesome. That episode feels a little unhinged, almost in the same way that like the interdimensional cables kind of took risks, were willing to go out on a limb, explore really bizarre concepts and themes. Maybe this is going to be that type of episode. We can only hope. Yeah.
And part of the reason he sought out that individual is because algebra has numbers and letters together. What does that mean? What kind of if letters and numbers are fighting eternally, but they're together in an ancient scroll? What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Rob Schrab taking the mundane.
Credit to Rob. Lucas Gray directing the episode. Excited to see that whenever it airs. But yeah, that was pretty much our sneak peek of season 7. It was brief. It wasn't animatic, so not finished animation or anything like that. But it was cool. It was cool that they were willing to bring that and give fans that were able to attend a little sneak peek at some things to come.
That's right.
I'm gonna roll through the Q&A topics pretty quickly. Some of the questions really good, really insightful. Other ones a little bit more comedic or just one-off questions. First one being Brett Kahn. Is he good or evil? And I think they made a joke about him always being evil or always being good, and it's always been that way because he can just retcon whatever.
Yeah. And I think it was Elisa who was like, he's neither. He's neither. He's neither good or evil, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. He's chaos. There's another question after that was, you ever sneak people or things into the show? Well, before we answer this question, this fan question, we were talking to Jacob Hare's friend who was there at the panel before the panel even started.
Yeah.
And his friend was telling us about how Jacob had inserted his longtime girlfriend, now wife, as a character in Rick and Morty. Well, the Vat of Acid episode, that girl that Morty falls in love with and has a whole life with was in fact like the model of his wife as a
Based
younger
on his current wife. Yeah.
and so his friend was telling us that ahead of time. We're like, oh, that's super cool, and we had a conversation about it. Well, once the panel was going and this question was asked, ever sneak people or things you know in? Jacob Hare mentions, yeah, I snuck my girlfriend, now wife, in as Morty's girlfriend in the Vat of Acid episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Elisa said, any resemblance is purely coincidental.
Yeah,
I know.
they had a lot of like one-off ideas about like things that are true to life, or you mentioned you write what you know. Yeah, they write about people and things and draw characters that look like people they know, because that's what's around you. Additional insights that the whole beekeeper bit with Jerry is a jab at James Siciliano. Because he's the guy that talks about bees way too much, and that's why Jerry keeps bees. And they kind of said James is really similar to Jerry in a lot of ways, I guess. So that's interesting behind the scenes knowledge that I don't think we knew as a fact before we went to the panel.
Yeah. Dan's can crusher got written into the show. Dan went through his like pandemic engineering woodworking phase, and so he would come into the writer's room talking about like, oh, I made a can crusher, and then lo and behold, right what you know, they're talking about the can crusher in the episode. Yeah, and then so I mentioned it earlier with the Jeff Loveness, Quantum Mania, multiverse stuff, writing the tag with Mr. Poopy Butthole being divorced and alone, in and off, and he was at the time in an on and off again relationship, and he poured all of that into the tag. And they said that like usually Harmon like rewrites everything, but he was like, no, that's perfect.
You got it, Jeff. Yeah, so I thought those answers were really good. We talked about the Justin recast. There was a question on if Giant Incest Baby would come back. Huge applause from the audience.
Surprisingly huge.
Naruto.
Naruto.
Huh?
Naruto.
Yeah. But yeah, so expect maybe to see that character come back in a future episode. There was a question on if Morty would ever get a girlfriend, which I was like, I feel like he's had girlfriends, like
he's had girlfriends.
Planetina, just I don't know.
But the Vat of Acid episode, he had that girlfriend forever, right?
Yeah, and then Jerry reset it, so it doesn't count.
Well, Morty remembers.
Yeah. Pepperidge Farms remembers. Anyway, yeah, so they said that they have written up to part of season 9, which is incredible. And Steve Levy's saying, yes, Morty gets a girlfriend at some point. So he said it kind of matter-of-factly, so I'm interested to see where that goes.
He did. Now the next question was, they asked if Squanchy will ever squanch again. And the team, Steve Levy specifically says, guess what, everybody? You probably already heard this news on Twitter. This is part of like the Twitter news, like the hard hitting, quote unquote Twitter news. That yes, Squanchy will be back in the premiere of season 7. As a matter of fact, the whole gang of Rick's friends will be back in 701. Bird Person, Mr. Poopy Butthole, Gene, and Gearhead, everyone's favorite.
Yeah. So that's exciting. I don't know if that's going to be done in like a flashback. I feel like it'd have to, but maybe not. Maybe there's some way that Squanchy will squanch again. And then finally, at the end of the Q&A session, we got one last bit of video, and that was a the title sequence to the first Rick and Morty series spinoff. This is a standalone series based on the Rick and Morty characters, but separate from the actual Rick and Morty series, and that is the Rick and Morty anime. They posted this title sequence, I think, same day, right after the panel, so you can definitely find it online if you missed it. And as a person that's not hugely into anime, I don't watch a lot of anime typically. I still have a definite appreciation for the art style, and this looked really good to me. I thought, I mean, this is something that, especially as a Rick and Morty fan, I'm gonna check out and see what they do with the characters and see if it feels different or if it feels, like what the new take is on the characters. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And we went to the Adult Swim festival over there on the Green as well, and we stopped by for the Toonami presentation, and they showed a lot of different anime actually during that presentation, along with the Rick and Morty anime title sequence again. And I'm almost like, maybe I should watch more anime.
Yeah.
It's not quite designed for binge watching, not like a Fox animation is normally, right? Fox
Right,
animation. Sorry. Going into.
I mean,
inside
Robotech was built for binge watching. It's the original serialized, series.
That's right. That's right. But seriously, I think getting it more into anime, I think is cool, and I think maybe the Rick and Morty anime might be a stepping stone, or a gateway drug to watching more anime.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I don't know. It looks good. I think the energy was high on it, but again, we only saw a title sequence, so how the actual show itself will be is anybody's guess. But yeah, excited for that to come out. I don't know if we got an actual release date for the anime.
I thought we did, but I'll have to take a gander.
I'm looking at the YouTube notes on the title sequence, and it doesn't say it here. So yeah, not entirely sure, but yeah, I'm excited for that to come out whenever it does.
I am too. It's supposed to come out. We know that it's going to come out in 2023. We don't know if there's actually a premiere date for it yet, but I am excited for it when it does.
Soon, as Steve Levy would say. It's coming
very
out soon.
Very soon. But yeah, no, the overall, like, well, we want to say that, like, I think going into the panel before the writer's strike, before the SAG-AFTRA strike, it was probably going to be a little bit different. And we did, we caught somebody, they actually caught us on the floor, like Saturday or Sunday. They're like, oh, hey, they came up and talked to us, and they were like, yeah, we got pulled in a couple days, like a week before. Like, they weren't expecting to be there, which means that, like, we probably could have expected the voice actors, Sarah Chalk or Chris Parnell, definitely Spencer. Like, they probably would have been there to have that which was that panel. So yeah, Travis, you know what I was saying that entire time, and I appreciate you listening in. That you didn't interrupt me, and you just shut your mouth, and you didn't say anything, and you looked at me with a blank, dead stare. You didn't move at all.
Nope, because I respect your insight, and I respect your perspective as a podcaster, Brandon. I've always been that way, and I always will be.
Well, wait for fiber is what I'm saying.
Yeah, fiber internet, the next phase of this podcast. But with that in mind, do we have any listener suggestions or short outs? We want to talk about a few reviews that we've gotten recently, Brandon.
I do want to talk about a couple of reviews that we got. The first one is from Corman, Corpseman 84004 FMF. He or she writes, you talk more about what the title is, What Is This? A 1-star. You talk more about random stuff more than the show itself. I listened to 3 episodes and they all are not about the show, just randomly talking about anything but the show. Now this was posted in June 8th. Now for like the last, I will say, that's fair. We do talk about
Fair
a
point.
lot of random stuff on this show, especially when the show's not on. When there's no new episodes, we've covered season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've covered a lot of these things multiple times, and so it becomes difficult. And we've talked about this for long-time listeners, the difficulty of like maintaining content and
Yeah.
continuing to bring content. We don't want to rest on our laurels and give you just like a half-assed thing. So we do research. We try to get content that is somewhat related to Rick and Morty, and it's not for everybody. I mean, we're not for everybody, and that's fair as well.
Sure.
But 1-star.
Yeah, I am curious, and maybe you can send us an email or hit us up on our Instagram. Let us know. Do you appreciate these types of episodes where we go into the content that is adjacent to the show, or do you want us to just rehash and rewatch episodes over and over again and talk about them over and over again? Because I mean, we can do that. Like we can. We just don't know that will be as fresh or interesting. And obviously, we're going to talk about the actual episodes as they come out. If you are new here and you are just checking us out for the first time, 1, I appreciate you getting this far into the episode. But 2, definitely dig back into the backlog of our show, because we have reviewed at least once, if not more than once, every episode of Rick and Morty. And to a degree, we've rehashed different aspects of some of those episodes. So we again want to keep things fresh, want to keep things interesting. But if this isn't the type of stuff you want, we appreciate that feedback as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so our next review is a 2-star review, and this one kind of hit me. It struck me because I failed this person. I failed this person because I'm the one who edits the podcast. I'm the one who is supposed to pay attention to the ad breaks and where they fit in, right? They're supposed to line up with semi-pertinent news. They're supposed to line up with the main thing, especially the main thing, right? That's where they're supposed to fall. I slide an adjuster or whatever and say, okay, 21 minutes and 30 seconds. That's when it starts. Okay. So here's the review, 2-star, great in the beginning, but ... by J-Top. Recently, the ads are just edited weirdly into the episodes, like they would be talking and then all of a sudden it would cut them off and play an ad. Way too abrupt, literally mid-sentence, dropping the podcast after following for 4 years. Man,
Ouch.
that is an ouch, but it is solid feedback. And J-Top, if you ever come back, just know that I hear you and I appreciate you, and I'm gonna make a larger effort to make sure that those ads aren't as interruptive as they have been.
Yeah, and I think we can just do a better job as we're recording the episodes to give ourselves space within those ad breaks to be more deliberate about them. Instead of cutting right into those segments, we can say, after this break, we'll be back with semi-pertinent news. Take a beat and then go after that, right? So, again, not a lot of stars, but very valuable feedback and reviews for us, so we appreciate that review as well.
100%. And for anybody else who puts a review out there, if you think that you want to give us a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, you can always also send us that feedback directly, and we welcome it and we appreciate it, because we want this show to be not only for us talking out loud about one of our favorite shows, Rick and Morty, but we also want it to be accessible and interesting and something that you want to listen to, Unity. So if you want to give us some feedback, send us an email, rickandmortypodcast@gmail.com. Post anything on any of our YouTube or our Instagram @rickandmortypod or on X.
No, get it out of here. No X.
Twitter. Go to Twitter.
No X. No X.
Stupid Twitter, man. Whatever. That's an AE topic, but go out there, give us that feedback. We accept it, we appreciate it, and we will make an honest effort to incorporate it.
Yeah. And we appreciate everyone that listens. Thank you for listening to this episode. And until next time, I'm Travis.
And I'm Brandon. Thank you so much.